I'm Marcus Chen, and for 12 years I designed buildings that touch the sky. What I couldn't design was a way to keep my marriage from crumbling at ground level. The first crack appeared on a Wednesday morning in our Denver penthouse. Sarah had this routine. She'd make her green smoothie, kiss my temple, tell me about her yoga class. But that morning, she skipped the smoothie, avoided my eyes, and her yoga mat sat untouched by the door. Small things, insignificant to anyone else. To me, they were architectural flaws in the structure we'd built together. I'm trained to see what others miss. 12 years designing high rises teaches you that every detail matters, that small weaknesses compound into catastrophic failures. A quarter-inch miscalculation on the fifth floor becomes a 3-foot deviation at the 50th. Sarah's changes were like that, tiny shifts that signaled something fundamental had moved in our foundation. The perfume hit me next. Sarah wore the same scent for our entire marriage, something light with jasmine notes that reminded her of her grandmother. But for 3 weeks, she'd been coming home smelling like amber and vanilla, something dark and expensive. When I asked, she said it was from her new client, a fashion executive who air-kissed everyone at meetings. I nodded, filed it away, started counting. Her phone became an extension of her body. Sarah used to forget it constantly, leave it charging in the bedroom while she cooked, abandon it on the bathroom sink during her evening bath. I'd bring it to her and she'd laugh, call me her technology shepherd. Now it lived in her purse, her pocket, her hand, always face down when she set it down, always tilted away when she typed. The real tell was her voice. Sarah had this particular laugh, warm and genuine, the kind that made strangers smile when they heard it. But lately, a new laugh had emerged. Brittle, performative, designed for an audience I couldn't see. She'd look at her screen and produce this sound like wind chimes made of glass, and something in my chest would tighten. We lived in Lodo, in a building I'd helped design 5 years ago. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, exposed brick industrial beams, the kind of place architectural magazines photographed. We'd hosted dinner parties where colleagues marveled at the space, at how perfectly we fit into it. Sarah would lean against the kitchen island, Italian marble I'd sourced myself, and tell stories about her interior design business while I grilled on our rooftop terrace. That life felt like something I'd sketched but never actually built. The breaking point came during a Sunday brunch. We were at our favorite spot, this farm-to-table place in Rhino where they knew our order. Sarah's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her entire face shifted, pupils dilated, lips parted slightly, a flush creeping up her neck. The kind of physiological response you can't fake. She typed back quickly, fingers flying, smiling at the screen like it held something precious. Then she looked up at me, and the smile rearranged itself into something appropriate for a husband. "Client emergency," she said, already standing. "I need to make a call." She walked outside, pacing on the sidewalk where I could see her through the window. Her whole body language had changed, animated, engaged, alive in a way I hadn't seen in months. When she laughed, that new laugh, I could see it shake her shoulders. I sat there with my cooling coffee and understood with perfect clarity that I'd lost her to someone I'd never met. That night, I went to my home office, the one room in our penthouse that was entirely mine. Drafting table, architectural models, walls covered in blueprints and sketches. I sat at my computer and did what I'd been avoiding for weeks. We had a shared cell plan. I'd set it up years ago for the family discount, never thinking I'd use the administrative access for anything except paying bills. Now I logged into the account management portal and enabled location tracking on Sarah's phone. The little blue dot appeared immediately. She was home, 2 rooms away, taking a bath. I scrolled back through the history. 3 weeks of data. 3 weeks of lies mapped in precise GPS coordinates. Last Tuesday, she'd said she had an all-day consultation with a client in Boulder. The dot showed her at the Crawford Hotel downtown for 6 hours. Friday, she'd claimed a site visit in Evergreen kept her until 9 p.m. The dot never left Cherry Creek. Specifically, it never left the Halcyon Suites, a boutique hotel known for discretion. I built a spreadsheet. Date, location, what she told me, what actually happened. 14 instances. 9 different hotels, always during business hours, always with a plausible cover story. The nausea came in waves, not from the betrayal itself, I'd suspected for weeks, No, I was sick because of the engineering of it, the careful architecture of her deception. Each lie was load-bearing, supporting the next one, creating a structure of dishonesty that she walked through every day without it collapsing. I didn't sleep. I sat at my drafting table and sketched meaningless lines that became buildings, became bridges, became nothing. My hands knew what to do when my mind couldn't process what I'd learned. At dawn, I called James Whitmore. We'd met in grad school at MIT, both studying architecture before he pivoted to law. Now he specialized in family law, helping people dismantle the structures they'd built together. I need a consultation, I told him. Structural failure. Complete rebuild required. James knew me well enough to understand. My office, 10 a.m. His firm occupied the 23rd floor of a building I'd designed 3 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me, sitting in a structure I'd created planning to demolish my marriage. I brought my laptop, my phone, printed maps with routes highlighted. James reviewed everything with the same precision he'd once used reviewing my thesis designs. "This is comprehensive," he said finally. "More than we need, honestly. Colorado's no fault, so the adultery doesn't legally matter for the divorce itself, but it matters for everything else: asset division, spousal support negotiations. You've documented this perfectly." "I'm an architect," I said. "Documentation is what I do." "Marcus," James set down his pen, "I need you to hear this. You can't approach this like a design problem. This isn't about optimal solutions or elegant structures. This is about your life falling apart. You're allowed to feel it." "I don't have time to feel it," I said. "I need to know my options." James outlined them. Quick divorce, clean split. The penthouse was in both names, purchased during marriage with joint assets. We'd likely need to sell and divide the proceeds. Her design business was separate, Ted. My architecture firm was separate. No kids, thank God. It should be straightforward. "What about her?" I asked. "The other person. What about them? Don't I need to know who it is?" James leaned back. "Do you want to know?" I thought about that, about whether putting a face to the betrayal would make it more or less real. "Yes," I said finally. "I need to see the whole structure before I can tear it down." Finding him took 2 hours. Sarah's design firm had a website with a portfolio section. Each project listed the collaborators, contractors, suppliers, other designers. I cross-referenced her calendar with the projects, matched locations with the GPS data. His name was Julian Torres, architect like me. Specialized in residential design, worked for a competing firm. 40 years old, award-winning, one of those people whose work gets featured in Dwell and Architectural Digest. His LinkedIn showed him at industry events, gallery openings, design conferences. In half the photos, Sarah was there too. Same events, same crowds, close enough that their arms touched in the group shots. I found his personal Instagram. There she was again, tagged in a story from 2 weeks ago at some rooftop bar opening, another from a month back at a design lecture. They'd been hiding in plain sight, disguised as professional colleagues. His profile listed him as married. Wife was a landscape architect, 2 kids. House in Wash Park that he'd probably designed himself. I screenshotted everything, added it to my file, built the complete picture of what Sarah had been doing and who she'd been doing it with. That evening, Sarah came home late. "Client dinner," she said, kissing my cheek. I could smell that wrong perfume, could see how carefully she'd reapplied her makeup. "How was it?" I asked, my voice steady. "Exhausting." "You know how these design types are. Everyone wants to talk about their vision." She rolled her eyes, making it a shared joke about difficult clients. I thought about Julian Torres, about his vision, about whether they laughed together about their respective spouses. "I'm sure you handled it perfectly," I said. The next day, I followed her. Not because I needed more evidence, I had plenty, but because I needed to see it, to make it concrete, to transform data points into reality. She left our building at 11, dressed in that way that meant she wasn't actually going to a client meeting. Too much effort for a Tuesday, too deliberate. I followed 3 cars back in my Audi, basic surveillance techniques I'd learned from a documentary about private investigators. She drove to the Ramble Hotel in Reno, parked in the back lot. I watched her check her phone, fix her lipstick in the visor mirror, take a deep breath like she was preparing for something important. Julian arrived 10 minutes later. Black Tesla. Because, of course. He was tall, fit, wore the kind of casually expensive clothes that screamed creative professional. They met at the entrance, not quite touching, but the space between them was charged with something I could see even from across the street. They went inside together. I sat in my car for 3 hours, sketching on a notepad, designing buildings I'd never construct, waiting. When they emerged, the sun was setting. He walked her to her car, said something that made her laugh, that new laugh, and briefly touched her lower back before walking away. I drove home. Sarah arrived an hour later, face flushed, hair slightly mussed, lying smoothly about a complicated client consultation that ran long. That night, I made my decision. I spent the next week preparing. I took half days from work, claiming project deadlines. Instead, I met with James, reviewed documents, planned my approach with the same precision I'd use for a major construction project. I didn't want revenge. I wanted honesty. I wanted Sarah to understand that I knew, that I'd always known, that her carefully constructed deception had never been as solid as she thought. The following Friday, I told Sarah I had a late client dinner. Instead, I drove to Julian Torres's home in Wash Park. Beautiful craftsman, probably built in the 1920s, restored with obvious care. Landscape was immaculate, his wife's work, no doubt. I knocked at 7 p.m. Julian answered, casual in jeans and a Henley, clearly not expecting anyone important. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I'm Marcus Chen," I said. "Sarah's husband. We should talk." I watched recognition hit him like a physical force. His face went pale, then red, then pale again. "I don't—" "Save it," I said quietly. "I know everything. GPS data, hotel records, photographs. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to inform you of what happens next." We stood in his doorway, his beautiful home behind him, his life about to change. "Sarah will be served with divorce papers on Monday," I continued. "You don't need to contact her about this. In fact, I'd prefer you didn't contact her at all, because if you do, if you continue this relationship in any form, I'll ensure your wife receives copies of every piece of evidence I've collected, hotel receipts, location data, photographs, all of it." "You can't." "I absolutely can. You're both adults who made choices. Now you get to live with consequences. Sarah will deal with hers through our divorce. You'll deal with yours by ending this immediately and completely. Do you understand?" Julian nodded, his face ashen. "One more thing," I said. "That hotel in Cherry Creek you both love? They know me. I designed their renovation 3 years ago. The manager was very helpful when I explained I needed security footage for a personal matter. You might want to choose your meeting places more carefully in the future." I left him standing there and drove home. Sarah was on the couch watching something on her laptop, looking peaceful and content in our home that she'd been systematically betraying. "Hey," she said, smiling. "How was your dinner?" "Productive," I said. "Very productive." Monday morning, after Sarah left for a breakfast meeting that her GPS showed was at her actual office, the process server arrived at her firm. I was in my own office when my phone rang. Sarah, of calling from an unknown number. "What the hell is this, Marcus?" Her voice was shaking. "Divorce papers? You're serving me with divorce papers at my office?" "Yes," I said calmly. "Did you read them?" "Of course I read them. This is insane. We need to talk about this." "We don't, actually. Everything you need to know is in those documents. You have 30 days to respond through your attorney." "Marcus, please." "I know about Julian," I said, and the line went silent. "I know about the hotels. I know about every lie you've told me for the past 4 months. I have documentation of all of it. So no, we don't need to talk. You need to find a lawyer." "How did you—" "I'm an architect, Sarah. I notice when structures are failing. I noticed months ago. I just needed time to gather the evidence." She started crying. "It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything. Mistakes happen once. You made choices repeatedly over months. Those are two different things." "Can we please just talk in person, please?" "No. All communication goes through attorneys now. You have 2 weeks to move out of the penthouse. After that, it goes on the market." I hung up. She showed up at our building that evening. I watched from the window as she tried her key card. I'd had it deactivated that afternoon. She called my phone 17 times. I didn't answer. Finally, she stood in the lobby and screamed my name until building security asked her to leave. I sat in the home I'd designed, in the life I'd built, and felt nothing but a cold, clear certainty that this was the right choice. The divorce took 3 months. Sarah tried everything. Tearful calls to my office, letters delivered by courier, showing up at my gym, my favorite coffee shop, anywhere she thought she might find me. Each time I referred her to my attorney. Julian apparently didn't follow my advice. He tried to contact Sarah 2 weeks after I confronted him. I sent the evidence to his wife the next day, as promised. Their divorce filing hit the public records system a week later. Sarah lost her business. Turns out, when your personal life becomes professional gossip, high-end clients get nervous about association. She'd built her reputation on being the designer who understood sophisticated lifestyles and beautiful partnerships. Hard to maintain that image when your own partnership collapsed so publicly. The penthouse sold for above asking. We split the proceeds evenly. I didn't fight her on that. The money didn't matter. What mattered was the clean break, the final dissolution of something that had been dead for months while I was too trusting to see it. I bought a loft in a building I designed 2 years ago, smaller than the penthouse, but entirely mine. I filled it with my drafting table, my models, my sketches, started taking projects I actually cared about instead of just projects that paid well. Six months after the divorce finalized, I ran into Sarah at a design conference. She looked different. Thinner, harder, wearing clothes that seemed like they were trying too hard. "Marcus," she said, approaching me despite the obvious avenue of escape I'd left myself. "Sarah, can we talk? Just for a minute?" "We don't have anything to talk about. I just want you to know I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. I destroyed something good, and I know that now." I looked at her, this woman I'd loved for 12 years, who'd become a stranger in stages so small I almost missed them. "I believe you're sorry," I said, "but you're sorry you got caught. Sorry there were consequences. That's not the same as actually understanding what you did. That's not fair. Fair would have been you being honest months ago. Fair would have been you ending our marriage before starting something with someone else. Instead, you built an entire structure of lies and expected it to hold. It didn't. That's not unfair. That's just physics." I walked away. A year later, I'm standing in my loft, working on designs for a children's hospital. The project won't make me rich, but it matters. Real impact, real purpose. My drafting table faces floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. I can see 3 buildings I designed from here, their lights twinkling in the dusk, permanent structures that will outlast any of the temporary pain I felt. I dated a few people. Nothing serious yet, and that's fine. I'm rebuilding myself the same way I rebuild buildings, carefully, with attention to foundation, making sure every element can bear the weight it needs to carry. Sometimes I think about Sarah, about Julian, about the wreckage they left behind them, but mostly I don't. They're footnotes in the story of who I used to be. I'm an architect. I build things. And sometimes the most important thing you can build is a life honest enough to stand on its own without needing lies to hold it up. The city lights flicker on one by one as night falls. And I turn back to my drafting table, to the hospital design, to the work that matters. Building. Always building. That's what I do.